This episode is being brought to you by the dental event of the year, the 11th Annual Dental Success Summit. Join us as DSI's incredible black belt coaches and I pass on the highest level of strategic and tactical knowledge that you'll be able to immediately integrate into your dental office in order to help you to evolve into a more efficient, profitable, and fulfilled business owner. So join us in San Antonio on April 12th and 13th at the beautiful La Cantera Resort for what will be a life-changing experience for all who attend. Make sure you take advantage of our early bird pricing, which expires soon at 45% off the normal ticket price. For more information or to register, just go to truedentalsuccess.com. That's truedentalsuccess.com. Look forward to seeing you in San Antonio.
The Dentalpreneur Podcast. Okay, doctor, it's time to put down that handpiece. You're listening to the show dedicated to helping dentists get their lives back. It's time to decrease your stress, increase your profitability, and regain your passion. Now introducing your host, Dr. Mark Costas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dentalpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mark Costas. What's up, my friends? Hey, this episode is a Surgical Saturday episode. Whether or not you're listening to this on Saturday is unimportant, but if you guys are looking for more practice management business type topics, then this maybe isn't the episode for you, although this is a non-clinical episode where we're talking about Full-Arch Patient and the life cycle, integrating that patient into a private practice and integrating systems for full arch workload into a private practice. In this particular episode, it features Dr. Taher Dhoon, Dr. Dan Briskie, and Chris Richards, and they talk about the life cycle of a full arch implant patient, building an infrastructure for advanced clinical procedures, actionable steps to kickstart an implant program from scratch, navigating the challenges of creating a foundation for implant programs, addressing common concerns and roadblocks in infrastructure development, and finally, team onboarding and training for advanced surgical and restorative procedures. All right, guys, I hope you get a ton of value from this. These Surgical Saturdays have been great. Dr. Dhoon, Dr. Briskie, and Chris Richards have been incredible with spreading the word about expanding your clinical skill set, expanding your clinical suite, and getting more high-end procedures integrated into your dental office without having to refer them out. All right, guys, have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Hey, everybody. This is Dr. Dhoon from Colorado Surgical Institute, welcoming you to another episode of our Surgical Saturdays. Today, we're actually going to take a different approach in terms of not talking about a clinical procedure, but more so than not the implementation of how to actually get patients into your practice and getting them to say yes to these clinical procedures. Because quite frankly, that's going to be one of the more important things. Obviously, getting the skill set to do no harm and keep your end of the Hippocratic Oath up is obviously very important. And we will talk about that on a lot of episodes, and we train on that at our live patient training courses. But also a lot of questions from all of the docs, about what we're doing here is how do we get patients into the practice, get them scheduled, the psychology behind these patients, and then at the end of it, how do we get them to leave the referral and review and the marketing videos so we can go and generate more patients coming into the practice? So I have with me today Chris Richards, who is the Executive Director of Colorado Surgical Institute. And you all know Dr. Daniel Briskie, one of the founders of Colorado Surgical and the lead clinical doc. And it's part of our crew. So how are you guys doing today?
Doing good, man. Just sitting in a hotel right now at a little table and doing a podcast. So another good weekend.
Yeah. Hotel in Palm Beach, right?
Yes. Yep.
Not bad. I'm doing great. It's good to be back. Went and spent Christmas with family for the first time in 10 years. I don't know if I want to do that again, but I'm still going to see them.
Yeah. It sounds like a lot of good and a lot of complicated.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Well, Chris, I'm going to hand it off to you, man. You have a really good insight of how the internal workings of my practice work, as well as Dr. Briskie's. For everyone listening, I started my evolution into surgery and full arch from an existing acquisition that was just doing bread and butter. So I had to naturally kind of create this within an existing office. So a lot of people listening are going to be like, okay, cool. That's my situation. I'm trying to add a new skill set to the mix. And then for Dr. Briskie, he went into his startup with the intentionality of doing surgeries. And I mean, I'll let you share what you and Ryan, your marketing guy, talked about. But that's, phenomenal also. And so it's just two different pathways we're going to talk about. And Chris, I'm going to hand the mic off to you because you know how to, guide and moderate this far better than I do.
Sure. Yeah, this will be a really exciting topic as what we'd like to talk about is kind of the life cycle of a full arch implant lead from the moment it comes into the office, like with a phone call, or whether that's an email or some form of social, all the way down through the consultation process, the first initial phone call, and then of course the close. I think what's interesting is that this process involves a lot of people. And one thing that we did with Dr. Dhoon in his practice, I can speak directly. I worked with Dr. Dhoon to help develop his implant program. And Dr. Briskie and I have had lots of conversations about where his program is going, is that we're going to be coming from two very, very different perspectives. There's some overlap here and there, but for the most part, Dr. Dhoon style, Dr. Briskie style, very different. Also, there's a lot of differences within some of the intentionalities that you guys are bringing to the table. Dr. Dhoon, you were practicing, or you had your practice open for nearly a decade when your program really started rolling, when I came into the picture. And then Dr. Briskie, you started your startup with the express intention of doing full arch implants. So I'm excited to see, with coming from those different backgrounds, what you guys did differently, what you did the same. And like Dr. Dhoon had mentioned, I know a lot of listeners are going to be, their ears are going to be perking up and saying, this is me, this is me. So I guess kind of starting off, what I wanted to go over from both the treatment presentation and kind of the lead generation aspect, but then also the doctor perspective, is the life cycle of a full arch patient and so maybe some of the nuances. So kind of getting things started off, I know, Dr. Dhoon, you've tried a couple of different methods. You've had these leads and these patients be seen by a treatment coordinator, by an office manager, by a specific implant coordinator. And then Dr. Briskie, you're doing a couple of different versions as well. So from your guys' perspective, when you are working with these implant leads, right at the get-go, right at the initial conversation, what type of format and setting works best for you guys in your different areas?
So as a startup, I just want to say I pretty much do everything. So at the startup, I'd say before the office opened, I started a lot of my marketing endeavors about 4 to 5 months before I even opened. So I had to get a little extra working capital just to account for that. And then I would take all the phone calls. And I pre-scheduled all my patients for my implant leads or just the new patients myself. That definitely guaranteed some patients in the door that they were a little surprised that they got the phone by the doctor. I'm now entering my 7th month of the startup, and I'm about to increase my marketing spend again. So now I'm actually going to start re-answering the phone calls on the weekends for any implant leads again, because I just can't lose $1, right? One implant lead could turn into a 30, 40 grand case. So that would mean a big difference in my month as a startup. So Chris, do we want to just kind of go through like what we're doing marketing to the phone call? How do we want to do this?
Yeah, I like the idea of going through because I know both of you guys are doing different marketing techniques. I
would say a lot of my biggest question when I was opening the practice to my head was, how do I do both things at the same time? And by both things, I mean, how do I build a hygiene program and bring the general dental side up, but also make a healthy implant side? The best answer is you can't. I think you can do one or the other, but it's very hard to do both. I think if you ask anyone in the marketing area, especially SEO space, they understand that it's very hard to build both programs at the same time. So I had to make a decision. Did I want to focus on general dentistry and have my website look like, hey, this guy looks like he knows what he's doing. He sees families and it looks like he might do implants. Or do you want a website that says, this is the guy to go to in your area. He knows all this stuff. He teaches it. Go to him for his implants. And hey, he also does the easy stuff, right? So that was kind of the inner warfare that I had. So I decided that I was going to go with the implant side first. Most people do the opposite. I know talking with Ryan Gross at CMO Share, a lot of docs will start to build their hygiene program over a 3-year period. And then their patient population gets to a point where it can swing, the pendulum can swing, and then their implant program builds. I told him, though, that I'm too impatient and I need to start doing 3 to 4 arches a month right away because I know myself. And if I'm not doing it, I'm not going to be happy. So I decided to do the other way with more authoritative marketing, saying like, hey, Dr. Briskie knows what he's doing. He teaches other dentists this, right? Then you build a lot of your marketing campaigns around that portion. Luckily, it's been working so far. I've done 21 arches now. I'm starting my 7th month. And then also, right, the ones and twosies that are involved with it, or some soft tissue grafting or things like that. So I'm on track for over $1 million this year. So not bad for a startup. But at the same time, you start realizing, oh my God, I don't have a healthy hygiene program. I really need to get that going as well, right? Because at the end of the day, we're all going to build a practice up. And the reason we're building a practice up is eventually we're going to sell it. And if we're eventually going to sell a practice, then we need to also have hygiene and implants, right? Because eventually when you leave, that practice needs to sustain you leaving. So now when I'm at 7 months in, I'm starting to swing the pendulum a little bit differently, where I now have 2 different marketing companies. One is just doing my general, and then I have another doing just my implants. And both of them are cohabitating together. And I have 2 different marketing campaigns in total now that are going on. And I'm trying to become a dentist who can focus on both. So to be continued, I'll let you guys know how things work out in another 3-4 months from now and what ideas I come up with. But I'm really just trying to figure out how to grow both at the same time, rather than grow one and catch up with the other.
Right. Interesting. Have you found that with some of your campaigns with the kind of the general practice and with the implant, is there a lot of overlap with the actual messaging and the content, or are you creating 2 different types of messages?
You have to create 2 different types of messages, or multiple sites, right? To have these different messages where they come from. Because if you have an implant site, your family is not going to know that you do easy dentistry, right? And they're just going to completely bypass your website and not come in. Right. And the alternative, if you make your website look too simplistic, then your implant patients are not going to come to you because they don't believe that you're the one in the area who do it solely, right? So these campaigns are, in essence, they're competing with each other. So how do you build 2 things out at the same time when both are not established as quickly as you can, right? But I think it has to be done differently on different websites.
Awesome. I think it'll be really interesting to see where you're at in 3 months, because you make a really good point that a lot of marketing agencies have very specialized services, and it is hard pressed to find one that's really good with general dentistry and really good with the implants. So I'm excited to see where you're going to go with that.
Yeah, I think one thing that everyone needs to note is when you're in different geographic areas, what we say here could work, what we say may not work, specifically for where you are. If you're in an area that's saturated with a bunch of full-arch docs, way different approach. So talk to your marketing people, or you can call us directly and we can advise a little bit more specifically for your situation. Just keep in mind, we're talking about big old
like Houston, Texas.
Yeah, Houston, Texas, or your Tampa area, anywhere like Chicago. I mean, they got full arch people everywhere. Denver. So with that said, I mean, my experience has been a little different, right? I mean, I had my general practice that was there. And then when you start to implement new procedures, like we started doing orthodontics, or we started doing implants, or we started doing surgery or wisdom teeth or whatever, you just got to say, hey, like, this is something that we are doing now. And what we know now about this specific thing is X, Y, and Z. So I use the phrase "what we know now" because it kind of tells the patient to a degree that things have changed, and it's not that I was ever behind. It was more that things have got better, and I'm up to par, and I'm in the know of the new techniques that exist, and so I can do this procedure. Also, in my waiting room, in my TVs in my waiting room, I have a slideshow that talked about the procedures we're doing. So I had a lot of patients who we never spoke about sleep apnea with, who now they ask about sleep apnea because of the slideshow in the waiting room. The same thing is for full-arch implants. We went and recorded with the wellness hour. I'm not here to say everyone needs to record with the wellness hour. I think you need to be doing, 3 arches a month. And then, it's worth it at that point, because then it can maybe give you that next push into more arches. But again, depends on your geographic area, how expensive commercials are, all of the above, right? We don't want your P&L or your profit and loss statement to get out of whack because you're spending too much money on commercials that won't yield a benefit for you in your area. But in my area of Northern Colorado, it worked out really well. And now my area is saturated and it's yielding a little bit less. But when I started doing it years ago, it worked out really, really well. So education in your waiting room is a good way to educate your existing client base, to show them the new things you're doing in your practice. And then also a lot of people who are trying to build the program intentionally right now have done sporadically a few cases over the years. It's not like, it's binary, like it's a light switch and you're just going to be all of a sudden doing full arches. It's you've dabbled a little bit, you got burnt a little bit, you reeled back. Then you waited a little bit longer. Then you tried it again and you had success. And so you kind of moved forward a little bit more. So what I would do is with some of those cases that you've had success with, go ahead and reach out to those patients and offer them some kind of benefit, free cleanings for a year, whatever you want to do, right? You think of it like a dinner, a thank you, whatever you want to do, but get some video content, record what they look like, record their pre and post pictures if you have it, ask them to go back into their cell phones and send them to you. All of these things can be done to build your database or your Rolodex of patients who are going to speak highly about you in the practice, and take multiple angles and multiple vantage points, because 3 patients, you can make it look like they're 18 patients with the amount of pictures you take and how you utilize them online. And then as you start doing more cases, you start to build and build and build. And then you actually have 100 cases to show online. And all that comes with time. But I think all of those things that I did initially really helped to grow it. And then also I couldn't do this by myself because I have an established practice where I'm monitoring and doing different things. And there's always moving parts within the HR world and the hygiene department and endo and ortho and all this other stuff. And so you need to have a specific person. And for me, that was Chris, who's now the executive director of Colorado Surgical. But our paths crossed initially because we believed in creating this program into the practice, and it evolved naturally. So finding someone who has a way with people, really at the end of the day, what it is it's a human connection. It's, if you talk about $5,000, it's transactional. If you talk about $50,000, it's a deep connection and respect and understanding that needs to be formed. And you as the private practice owner can't always be the one who has the time to do that. But if you don't have the time to do that, then you're not going to close the cases. So you need to then find someone who has that ability to do that for you. I definitely have some more thoughts on all of that, but that kind of is like the umbrella statement of kind of how I started that. And then, obviously we can get into like, how do you incorporate, actually getting these patients scheduled in a startup versus the acquisition or that thriving practice that's already at capacity, because each is its own individual strategic maneuver.
Well, I love hearing the different stories, because Dr. Dhoon, you came at this with an established practice, wanting to incorporate this program and how it changed a few things for you, what you had to do, what you didn't have to do. And then Dr. Briskie, you're starting off from the beginning, so there's a lot more intention behind some of the marketing and thought processes. Also, you guys are relatively close in proximity, but the types of marketing that you have tried and you're doing is very vast, very different from one another. And I think that's the main thing that we should kind of take away from this part of our conversation, is that marketing is so geographical and so situational. I was talking with an office manager out of Canada and asking what kind of social and what kind of digital presence, and they were doing like 30 arches a month between a couple of offices, and they didn't do anything electronic. They didn't do anything digital. It was a newspaper ad that they took out, and that filled their entire implant schedule. So no matter or wherever it's working or however it's working, work with local experts, work with there are tons of companies out there that are going to help with SEO and with content creation. I want to kind of steer the conversation now towards what you guys have done and what can be done when the lead hits the office. Dr. Dhoon, thank you for the introduction. It was a lot of fun helping to develop this program. I brought in kind of a unique perspective. I've never been in dental before I started working with Dr. Dhoon. I have a couple of degrees in psychology and heavy marketing background with some sales mixed in here and there. So it was interesting coming in from a very kind of benign perspective on dentistry. We're focusing just on a conversation, and at least for me, that feels the best route. Because what we started noticing when we were talking with a lot of patients, there was some similarities between the conversations. I mean, everybody's story is uniquely different, but when we focused on what their dental journey was, it really changed a lot of stuff. One of the things that we, from kind of an HR, from a physical standpoint, we found that when we had these leads for full-arch implants jumping around, they were answered by someone at the front desk, and then maybe had a first initial conversation with someone at the front desk, or they went to a treatment coordinator, or sometimes our office manager was managing those calls. Having the jumping around from person to person really dramatically lessened the experience. So when we started having one singular person manage that entire experience, from the phone call to a CBCT to the initial consultation, and then even just standing there next to the person while they were going through the surgery, that made for a dramatically increased experience for the patient, but also it just made the quality of care even more intense for them as well. So when it comes down to that first step, that's the first phone call, where the lead comes in, where the patient calls in directly, or they come in through an email or through some other lead source. That first phone call seems to be kind of the make or break kind of perspective. Dr. Briskie, when you have your first initial phone call, what are the top 3 things that you want to accomplish in that conversation?
I want to establish myself as an authority. And that if you come and see me, or when you're ready to see me, I will do the best job of anyone that you come and see. Yeah. And I'm also the most affordable. I think patients really want to hear that. I think that's a big one. And that we're real people and we care, right? Like the genuine aspect of the telephone call and the visit, I think comes in huge. But as long as the patient trusts you, they come in, they know you're not scalping them for the price, because I'm sure they've been scalped before, or the doctor talks with them not confidently, because this surgery is a learning curve, right? Not everyone that listening to this podcast right now, may be completely perfect in their all next skills, right? So patients can kind of weed out the docs if they're smelling someone that's just not confident, right? So confidence is super key, not cockiness, right? So confidence, and that you're genuine and you don't cost substantially more than someone else. I think those are the biggest 2 things.
And those are some phenomenal pillars to this conversation, because patients want to come in, they want to feel very secure and confident with you. And establishing that authority is one of the huge ones. For you, what's the best one-liner to establish your authority, but not balance, like you said, too much into that cocky side of things?
Yeah, I mean, when I first meet them, I know we're talking about phone call first.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, phone call. Okay. So we have, when I take the phone call, as a doctor at least, or when my front desk Abby takes the phone call, she takes pretty much all my implant leads, and my other front desk will let the patient know, hey, Abby might be on break. She's our she's our lead and for managing all our implants, the implant patients. Let me get you over to her when she gets back, or something like that, or set up a phone call. So I try to get all the phone calls being taken by her or me. I don't hesitate to answer the phone call. But I try to tell them, I kind of greet them and say, hey, how'd you hear about me? Because I think that's my first line I'd say is, how did you hear about us? Right. Because I want to know where you came from. What marketing campaign did you come from? Right. Like, which one's the waste of my money right now? Which one can I decrease so I can increase the other one? Right. So after I find out where exactly did you come from, I ask them, like, what do you want to do? Like, what have you been thinking about doing? How long have you been waiting to do this? Right. And just kind of jump in their mind and let them know, hey, your first visit is going to be purely educational. Cause right now I have so many options to talk about. I have no idea what you want yet. But what I can do is during your visit, I can kind of jump inside your brain and I'll help you figure out what you want to do. Right. Because unless you know what you want to do, I can't quote you for something. I'm not going to quote you for something you may not want, or you're not ready for. So let's kind of figure out, what you are ready for, or if you're not ready yet, how many steps is it going to take for you to become ready? Right. And are you prepared financially yet? Or how can I help you become prepared financially? Right. So when we're taking like the side of being helpful, and helping them, on this information seeking visit in terms of what treatment planning wise they want to do and what financially that they want to do. And then I'm also not afraid to tell people, hey, maybe you're not ready for this yet. Maybe you're ready next year. How can I figure out to help you do this economically where you're not, pulling out a 20% loan to get this thing figured out? What if you waited 6 months? And some of the patients are a little bit taken back. They're like, whoa, like, you want me to wait? I'm like, yeah, like, do it financially responsibly too. Like, we care for you, but we're not going to sell you on something that we know is not right for you. Right? We're dentists, but we're also psychologists at the same time.
No kidding. Too many hats. When you tell patients that they're not ready for this or recommend them waiting, mm-hmm. How often do they then start figuring out ways to make it happen before that 6-month mark or whatever that time frame that you recommended?
I think when you put yourself in the position of not needing it the most, right? Like that they need it the most and not you, I think the pendulum swings where they're significantly more motivated to figure something out, I'd say, historically. But if patients can smell that I really want to make this sale or I'm pushing them on something, I feel like they always get just really turned away. So I'm the opposite of salesy, I'd say. I think I take a really genuine information seeking type of appointment. And I think patients really appreciate that. So anyone that comes in for me from a Clear Choice or like a Nuvia, they always say yes. It's like guaranteed.
Excuse me. I love that. I think that takes away a lot of the fears that a patient would have, that this guy's just trying to close me really quick. And they see you more as a human being rather than, some kind of lab coat with a 15 in his hand.
Yeah, and it's a little things. I mean, some patients will think that this is a car sales technique, right? And it's actually not, because the car salesman makes money off the financing. The dealership does. We don't make money off the financing. So just like pointing out little things like that during your visits to help earn the patient's trust comes a big way.
You had also mentioned, so you got authority and affordability, which I love the way that you've tied in your authority into the affordability of it, of the procedure. But then you go into kind of a real care. There has to be that human element. I'm going to toss this back over to Dr. Dhoon because I know that this is another pillar of his consultation process and some of the initial communication steps. Dr. Dhoon, where does this level that's like real human connection component fit in within your within some of the initial stages of your implant program?
So good question. I think it has to come at all levels, but then it really needs to be driven home by the doctor doing the presentation. So, if you do have marketing out there, you need to talk about the human connection. Like, who are you doing this for? A lot of people do stuff for other people versus themselves. It's a human component. If you're a parent, you're going to absolutely 100% relate to that. And then obviously, if you're not a parent, you can still relate to it on so many different levels as well. I just think with children, it's just enhanced that part of my life more profoundly. But when you show up for someone else, it's like you have the people on the phone call saying, hey, is there anything going on in your life that you're actually doing this for? What made you pick up the phone and call us? Like, what's happening? What do you have going on in the future? Do we have a deadline to hit? Is it a wedding? Is it a reunion? Is it something? Did a grandchild point something out? Whatever the case may be, it's just letting people know that they aren't alone in this. Because a lot of people feel like they're on an island with their own shame and their own vulnerability. What you need to let them know in some way without offending their dignity, but more in a way of saying, hey, you're part of a community still, is like, hey, like you have this going on. We just don't see these people because they choose not to smile. So we just confuse them as unhappy people. And I don't say it verbatim like that, but it just depends on the moment that I feel and how the delivery needs to occur based on their personality. So I think what you need to do first is take a step back and say, okay, disc analysis, if we're going to get like strategic with it and figure out like, okay, who is the composite of this person we're speaking to? And then 2, the training of your team members who are going to be part of this process on that philosophy of how to read a person in 5 seconds. You can't assign this to someone who's a analytic Excel sheet person who can't make a connection with a human being. This needs to be assigned to someone who genuinely cares about every phone call and every person and every story that they're going to hear, and making sure that that story, you are dialed in and they're not checking their email or their cell phone or doing anything, that they are truly invested in that conversation. And then 2, I think something else strategically you could do as the doctor is go on to YouTube, type in Randy Alvarez dental implants, and start watching some of the recordings that, the docs have done. Some are really good. Some are really, really bad. And so you can get an idea of the ones who are good. You get the idea of the ones who are bad. You can be like, oh shit, that one that was bad, I said that too. Let me not say that. I've heard good things that like Mike Picos said. He said, when a patient would say something that's incorrect, he would say a version of, hey, that's logical to think that, but it's actually this way. So you're complimenting the patient on them volunteering information about a question. You're telling them it's logical that they think that way, but it's actually different and for these various reasons. So yeah, there's a lot. Travis Kendall was really good. Jonathan Abenheim was good. God, there's a couple others I can't think of off the top of my head who did really good recordings. And what you'll do is, I'm favorable to myself and Dr. Briskie's recordings too. I was kind of like hesitating. So I was like,
mine's the best.
Does that sound like egotistical? But I think we did a pretty good job.
You just say it confidently. You're like, mine's the best.
I'm believing a little bit more in Briskie right now.
Yeah. Okay. So Briskie's exuding confidence right now. Listen to his first. And then if you like one, listen to it multiple times, just on your commute, right? Just listen to it while you drive. As I'm doing these consults, like different lines pop into my head about what I think this patient needs to hear. And a lot of my stuff is just lifted and curated. And then I alter it slightly to make it genuinely my own. But, a lot of stuff is just brought up from other people from the past who have done it as well or better than myself. So that's a good place to get like the knowledge from. And then
I like what you said about like making sure the patient doesn't feel like they're the only one that has this procedure done. I feel like I've really been able to pull on the emotional string for that one. Just letting the patient know, like, because they sit in a chair and they feel overwhelmed, right? I just tell them, hey, congrats on making it in the chair, right? You did have to work already. That's the hardest part. And then I tell them, this procedure is actually very common. And I tell them statistically how many people in Northern America need this procedure done. And then their eyes get big. They're like, holy crap. Like, I had no idea. And I let them know I've seen a lot of crazy stuff and yours is not one of them. Like, we can help you out. So just kind of letting them know that there's a solution right from the start, and almost kind of making it slightly laughable, where they don't feel so overwhelmed with sitting in the chair, I think goes like a big way. And I like that logical comment. That was a good one.
Yep. Well, I was 100% me who made that up. So,
or was it Mike Pico's?
yeah, Mike will never know.
Yeah.
I think that's a good point. That's definitely some overlap that I know that both of you, that's kind of in your repertoire of items that you say, is that to make them feel more comfortable, you let them know that they're not alone. Because in their day-to-day lives, they are the only ones with a busted up smile. They're the only ones who don't want to smile. They're the only ones who don't want to talk for fear of judgment or for fear of embarrassment. But the more that they know that there are others out there, and I like that you say, Briskie, this is a very common surgery, because in their mind, it's really scary. It's very unique. No one they know has had all the rest of their teeth removed and completely, artificial teeth implanted in there. So that time of bringing it down to more of a human level, I think really goes the distance.
Yeah, and like patients are just accustomed to a drill and fill place, right? Like go somewhere, get their fillings done, get their hygiene done. Nothing's wrong with that, right? Nothing's wrong with that. But there are different practices that do exist, right? Ones that are meant to take these types of patients to the finish line. They can do it very well. So they're just not used to seeing that type of practice. So I think once they find a doctor who cares and that they realize that this practice can handle their unique complications, that they feel very safe.
Yeah, I think what everyone who's listening to this podcast is going above and beyond for their career. I think the vast majority of people who are listening to podcasts like this are going to be on the better end of dentists. And it's like not all dentists are created equally. Not all electricians are created equally. Not all vets. Like my associate, she went to a vet the other week and they said they had to euthanize her dog because it was in heart failure. And then she went to 2 different consults and they found out that it was like, some pulmonary hypertension with fluid around the heart that gave this reading. If they only went to 1 consultation, they would have made a very bad decision for Gus. And so thank God Gus is still with us and they went to other consultations and she's in a very happy mood space as well, because that came like right before Christmas. But it all goes to show, like in the right hands, this knowledge can be something different to this patient. And you need to be the one who can convey that without coming across as cocky. And you have to do it with confidence. And if you don't have the repetition and the experience to do it with confidence, then maybe a little bit of honesty is needed in terms of like, hey, this is a new technique that's out there in this practice. I've done a lot of training on it. I'm going to do it at a reduced rate for you. And and my ask is that you do marketing videos for us. And so then you don't feel like you're overselling something you may not be able to deliver on. You can start doing these cases. The patient benefits because it's reduced. You can always call Dr. Briskie and myself and we can help you through it. And then from that point, you get started somewhere. Dr. Briskie and me started somewhere. Everyone who has a full arch center has started somewhere. We all started with our first case. We've all had to learn going through it. And I'll just say this. I've never even to date had a perfect surgery. Like there's something I could always have done better in one small area or another. And that is always going to be the case. And so it just get started, get some mentors and get the reps going. And you will absolutely 100%, as long as you like surgery, be fulfilled with when it comes to the transformational component and what you provide for these patients. So that all kind of happens in the phone call and consultations. They're in the chair. And it's like, how do we schedule them? Do you like to give them an hour and a half, Dr. Briskie, in your practice? What I do in my own is I do an hour and a half. If we rank them as a green, good phone call, we do an hour. If they're a yellow, we just don't know. And then we do half an hour if we think it's a bad phone call, but they still want to come in. So that way we're protecting a busy schedule already because I got to be in a lot of places at one time. So that's how my team will schedule my time. If these patients are kind of how we kind of rank them on a phone call.
I do all mine as an hour right now, just flat.